paper or plastic, or in this case, on paper or silicon. But when it comes to keeping track of the information gained from potential jurors during the voir dire process, most rely on a paper system, something like this. It's where you lay out Post-it notes or a grid to reflect where your jurors are seated, and then you try and write as much as you can about what they say, with some obvious limits. But for a task that seems to demand the kind of flexibility that an iPad platform would provide, there are a few options. Then before we get too excited, we need to remind ourselves of some of the practical demands of the jury selection situation. When potential jurors are answering questions and the moment is coming when you're going to need to exercise your peremptory challenges and your challenges for cause, then you need some kind of good system for attaining information and using it in some sort of organized fashion. And I'd say there are 5 criteria for what we would want an on-screen application to do in the jury selection situation. Number 1, we would want it to record information. All of the basic answers to questions that jurors are providing, all of the things that we typically write on Post-it notes. Number 2, we would want it to record a group response when, for example, everyone is raising their hands to answer yes to the same question. Number 3, we would want a system that somehow assesses the importance of information to tell the difference between a critical question and a not so critical question. Number 4, we would want some method of reporting all of this information, a useful format that can be used to inform the decision to exercise a cause challenge or to use one of your strikes. And then finally, ideally, 5th, we would want something that ranks the jurors, that tells you, based on the information that you have and that you know, how do these jurors play out from worst to best. So when looking at iPad apps, the response shouldn't be, gee, it's so cool that an iPad can do this, though definitely it is cool that an iPad can do this. But the question should be, can it perform and meet the demands of the situation at the level that replaces or is even better than pen and paper? Let's take a look at the apps. Now this is iJuror, an application for Apple's iPad tablet that was created by Scott Falbo and selling for $9.99 at the iTunes Store. This application allows you to open a new trial and lay out a seating grid that reflects the way your jurors will be seated during selection. And it also shows the jurors color-coded to indicate your like, green, dislike, red, or uncertainty, yellow, about particular jurors. Using this particular screen, you can go into a juror and use dials to add basic information on age, as well as gender, ethnicity, marital status, the number of children, educational level, whether there's police in the family, whether they have an arrest record, prior victim experience, prior jury experience. And it also allows you to set whether you like, are uncertain, or dislike the particular juror. So ultimately, you're able to simply drag jurors to indicate whether they're your strike, their strike, or whether they're a removal for cause. You can also use the drag feature to seat the ultimate jury. And you have a good visual overview of your jury. So the main limitation of the iJuror application is that you're limited to just those 11 categories. And while you can add notes for individual jurors, it wouldn't be practical to add all of the additional information as an unstructured note, because that would be just like a Post-it note, only slower, even if you're using an Apple keyboard. Now, the main items that you'll want to keep track of during jury selection will vary dramatically from case to case. In some cases, you'll want to know if the person's ever been a victim of a crime. In other cases, you'll want to know, have they ever been injured by a product? And that is why those 11 demographic items by themselves will really never be enough to inform your jury deselection decision. But still, it's a start, and it shows the strong potential for pad-based computing as an aid during jury selection. And there is another option. This is called Jury Duty, an application designed by Stacy Kelly and selling for $39.99 in the App Store. Now, the price alone might tell you that it's potentially a more serious program. You tap on panels to enter basic information about the case, the judge, the venue, the date, etc. Then you select Jury and Add Juror in order to add information about a particular potential juror. And again, if you have many to add, you will want a keyboard. The default screen covers some of the basics as well as up to 5 optional categories. From the seating charts view, you can populate the jury. That basically means that you can take the information you entered previously from the list and assign the individual a seat in the panel. You can also open up each juror to provide a recommendation of whether to accept, strike for cause, reject, or to assess that juror positively or negatively, to provide a recommendation of what you want to do with that juror. And there's a report view that provides a summary of that information for your panel, something that you can email or print. Now, the portability is great, but the problem is what the report lacks. The report lacks the underlying information that informed your decision of whether to approve or disapprove or strike or keep that particular juror. For it to be truly useful in the jury selection process, what you need is something that gives you the reason behind those decisions. Now, a similar gap shows up on the app's list of voir dire topics. It allows you to name a number of topics, and it allows you to indicate whether it was discussed or not discussed. But unless there's a way of capturing how each individual juror feels on each issue, I can't see how this list would be helpful in determining your particular strikes. The feature seems designed to help the questioner keep track of everything that's been covered in voir dire, but not to keep track of what the jurors say. But just like in depositions, it's the answers that matter. The use that the Jury Duty app seems to be designed for is this. The attorney gets the list of jurors in advance, types that information in, then uses the iPad at the podium as a dynamic seating chart to help in remembering the names and the basic information about the jury, and to create a list of topics and a check mark of whether those topics have been covered or not. That is, it's really designed more for data access than for data capture. It's designed more to replace the notepad on the podium than it is designed to replace the grid of sticky notes that is back at counsel table. Still, both iJuror and Jury Duty are able to do some impressive things with the iPad. So let's get back to our 5 criteria. Number 1, does it record information? Well, the answer for both applications is to a limited degree. But that keyword is limits. On an iPad, something that should allow really infinite possibilities for recording information, there are arbitrary limits. A preset question items, a limit of 5 optional elements that you can add for each juror, and basically the inability to add additional variables as they reflect the needs of each particular case. The bottom line is that with tiny writing and multiple notes, the Post-it note can still do better than that. By far the most important improvement that the Jury Duty app could add would be the ability to go into the jury seating chart view, tap on a juror, and add information on the way that juror has answered the particular topics. And number 2, does it record a group response? And the answer for both apps is no. You would have to open each individual juror and add a note reflecting their answer to that question. And again, if there were one improvement that we could advise for the Jury Duty app, it would be the ability to open up one of those voir dire topics and tap on each juror that answered affirmatively for that particular question. Number 3, does it help you assess the importance of the information? Well, the answer to that is no. For neither app is there a way to weight or rank the importance of the information that you're gaining in the process. And 4th, does it report? Well, yes, both apps allow options to print or email the information you're gaining, including the recommendations for strike or non-strike on the particular jurors. But what neither does, in a clear fashion at least, is provide the underlying rationale for this decision, including the information that would inform the decision of whether you're recommending a strike or not for a particular juror. And 5, does it allow you to rank the jurors? Well, the answer to that is no. For neither of these apps was I able to find a clear way to provide a ranking of the jurors from worst to best. And what that tells me is that the average user of these apps would have a strong impulse to make recourse to a trusted friend, the old pad of paper, in order to keep that list. Now, I have a high performance threshold, but that's a threshold that's created by the demands of the voir dire situation. As you're facing a storm of information in jury selection, and your challenge is to grab that information and hold it and use it in some organized and systematic way. Now, the bottom line is that is still a task that seems more intuitively suited to the screen than to the pad of paper. And so to me, the project of getting this information on screen in a fashion that attorneys and consultants can use is an idea that still holds a lot of promise. For example, I, and I suspect many others, have improvised over the years using systems developed for the PC computer. And just to illustrate, this is something that we call jury notes, and it's something we developed with the designer Marian Stoinev. And it's proprietary. It's something that we don't and won't sell, but it does illustrate how you can use an electronic tool in jury selection. And while it isn't as pretty graphically and it doesn't have the little avatars for the individual jurors, the program does allow you to create as many questions as you like. And in this case, we had a total of 76 questions that were addressed either in oral voir dire or through a supplemental juror questionnaire in advance. It allows you to indicate who is helped by the question, whether an affirmative answer favors the plaintiff, the defense, or neither, and if so, at what level on a scale from 1 to 10. It allows you to enter individual answers as well as comments for each particular juror, or it allows you to enter answers for all jurors at the same time. And for example, when a question asks jurors to raise their hands in response to a question, the program allows you to indicate every one of the jurors who is raising their hand in response to that question. The program also allows you to open a view for each individual juror, and within that view, see how the juror answers all of the questions, and allows you to enter additional notes, additional questions you want to ask that juror, and a summary for that particular juror. Based on the questions you create and the weights that you give to each question, then you can produce a ranking from the perspective of your own individual case. In this case, from the plaintiff's perspective, let's see the worst to best jurors. And that takes the answers that the jurors have given, applies the weight that you have given to each question, and then can tell you how each potential juror fares from a scale of pro-defense 100% to pro-plaintiff 100%. And to get a more detailed picture of each juror, Jury Notes will also produce an individual report showing how each question was answered and showing what went into that ranking. And you can also produce a similar report for each question showing how that question was answered by each potential juror. The program is currently for a laptop or for a tablet, not yet for an iPad, but it does provide exactly the kind of information as well as the flexibility to track the answers and the important information that you're gaining from potential jurors during the selection process. So if we get back to that original question of paper or the pad, the answer right now is to use what works. But it's not difficult to imagine a day in the future when an on-screen device, an iPad or something like it, becomes the tool of choice for attorneys and others who are working in the courtroom to keep track of the information gained during jury selection.